and I get this page about one of our servers going down. No big deal. We got redundancy, everything's pretty solid, hosted in good hosting services. And so I go home and get another page that our backup server is down. That's when I knew that we really had a problem.
How have you faced that? What are your thoughts on burnout?
Burnout and work-life balance is not something that you're attempting to be continually balanced. You'll never get everything exactly 50-50, 50% work, 50% life. It's something where you have to balance it over time, where you invest enough in work, you invest enough in family, it goes in cycles. You have cycles of life.
And it leads to a ton of these best days. Yeah. Because what ends up happening is people surprise you, and the product and the community surprise you in ways that you never saw coming. So hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Paul, CEO of OwnerRez, and
I'm Chris, CTO of OwnerRez.
And this is another episode. So today, I think we should talk about our best days and our hardest days. So let's start with that one, the hardest day. I think I know this one for you, but you should.
That's a good one. We've had a lot of hard days, but then there was one that stands out. It wasn't really a day. It was like 2 or 3 days all stuck together. This was back in, was it 2000? It was 3-4 years ago now. And I remember distinctly, it was that week after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's. And everything was going great. You were off on a trip, I think, Africa. I was at the gym. And I get this page about one of our servers going down. No big deal. We got redundancy. Everything's pretty solid. Hosted in good hosting services. And so I go home and get another page that our backup server is down. That's when I knew that we really had a problem. And I've been in charge of tech for years and years, so it all fell on me. And it's easy for things to fall on you when you don't have a big issue and you can go in and hop and solve the problem. But in this case, what turned out that had happened was we'd done an update to one of our servers. I had done an update to one of our servers a few days ago, and it was a valid update. Everything looked fine. It was tested. We've been testing it for months and months and months to make sure that it was all solid. And it turns out there was a very edge case bug in it that in a certain configuration, which we happen to have, would create this stepping data corruption that would overwrite just a little bit of each record one at a time, so small that you couldn't really notice it until a couple days later it caught up and the server would start crashing. So that was a bad day. And I talked to our service provider. They didn't have any solutions for us. There was no restore, there was no backup that we could go back to other than several days prior, which before the upgrade, which would have lost millions of dollars of transaction records. So I ended up figuring out a way that I was able to dump out all of our data, load it into a new server by hand, table by table, and it took 36 to 48 hours straight of doing that, going through with the service provider, figuring out, because they had to actually enable this restore. It would be blocked normally, so I wasn't able to do it on my own. I had to get it enabled, go through, build a system to do it, build a system to validate all those tens of gigabytes of data, put all the pieces back together, and get our system back up a couple of days later. So I was able to do that while you remotely from Africa managed the rest of the team to get everybody involved and handle all our support requests, download what data we could to give people information about their bookings during that time so they could manage their users. And eventually it came out successfully. We lost very minimal data, really none. We were able to undo the corruption after that, put a correct backup in place, put the correct server version in place, and get all of our data restored. And then after that, we spent the next 6 months to a year building in more and more redundant systems, backup systems, online data, read-only environments that would store all of that to make sure whatever happened, in any case, this was never going to happen again.
Well, yeah,
maybe
we could
I
go
did.
more on
Maybe
that.
I was a little too technical, because it's kind of halfway in between though. The problem was, and what it was is, first off, the system was completely down. Nobody could access it for who knows how long. It ended up being a couple of days, but nobody knew that at the time. And the only solution given to us was, we'll restore your data 2 or 3 days ago, which loses every transaction. So it was never going to be all the data was gone because we had regular backups, but losing 2 days, when you're running thousands, tens of thousands of transactions a day, that's major. You can't really recover from that.
Well, so what you just said was very technical about being in the trenches and being 24 hours, 48 hours in, sweat's dripping off your brow. Like, we're all there with you. But what I maybe have a window on this that nobody else has. Because for like a year and a half later, I saw the effects of that on you. That same moment. So it's like it's a moment, it's 24 hours, 48 hours, sweat, we're getting it all done.
Yeah.
But that stayed with you for a long time. Here's an example. Here's how I know. So we've talked before about whether we should take on investment, whether we should sell a piece of the company, or sell the whole thing. We're pursued all the time. We're very profitable. Our story's out there. And I feel like there were moments in the year or two after that where you and I saw it differently for the first time. I'm like 15 years of being very aligned. You and I were misaligned on how the future of the company should go. And I think a piece of that was because of that day. I could be right or wrong here. I'm asking you. But do you feel
I think, it took me a while, and I didn't realize it myself either for a year or two after how much that had impacted. I said a few minutes ago, like, everything was riding on me and I didn't realize it, but that really was, like, I was the guy. And that's something for probably 5 or 8 years, because at the beginning, you and I were in it together, kind of 50-50, both doing coding, both doing business, both doing support. And then at some point, probably 2018, 2019, it just became too much, really, for one person to do either of those things, to split it up like we were. And I had to focus on the code and make that happen, while you could focus on everything else and build a business and hire the people and the processes. So it was all on me to make sure the server stayed up all the time. And we didn't really have anybody in there. We had, we hired some folks, and they were starting to take up some of that responsibility. But even for a good, year or two after that, I was still the guy. And we started on-call rotations and switching it out to other people. But it took a good few years for that stress. Even now, right? I'll still
I was just gonna say,
see issues and hop in. I haven't fully disconnected,
all gone.
and
Yeah.
I still can see issues usually faster than anybody that's on call and say, hey, this is what the issue is and this is what the problem is. And that's something I catch myself doing, because if I keep doing that, then people aren't going to learn. And I have to do it in such a way where I provide them the information, but don't do it for them, so they can learn to capture that the next time and the next time and the next time as our team grows and build that skill.
Yeah, and to be clear, we have 9 engineers, 4 or 5 on tier 4, 3 or 4 that do the on-call rotation to get that call at night instead of you. So that burden is mitigated and spread out quite a bit now. But there was a period of time for, I think, a year or two, like you said, even now, but it's certainly a year and a half after that incident, where I feel like you wore it all the time. You wore that feeling, that fragility, this valuation, this millions of dollars, and what we thought this business was worth and where it was going. potentially, someone trips over a cord and it's all gone. Right? It's like that's the fragility there in the back of your mind.
Well, not only that, you've done every possible industry best practice, tested everything.
It's not even in your hands.
Everything,
right.
Yes, everything there, you did everything that you could do, possibly to make everything redundant and have backups and everything. And still, you can have that bug, not in any of your code, in some infrastructure code in a server provider somewhere, that reaches out and just smacks you across the face.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great point, because I remember we investigated that, wanting to know how to spot and mitigate that for the future. It was very depressing to find out, like, we couldn't have really known about it.
Yeah.
We tested it ahead of time in a QA environment. That had no problems. So it was kind of like, what was our takeaway? Well, our takeaway was be redundant and duplicate in other ways, provide other ways kind of back. But in terms of not ever introducing a bug or a piece of corruption like that again, I mean, it could actually happen again.
Yeah. I think it's less possible. I think there was a certain time for a certain year where our database provider, my school, had 5 or so bad releases. They were doing a lot of foundational stuff, and they had a couple edge cases, and they finally come around to it. They've done several new versions, got rid of the old ones, and it's a lot more solid now. We need to get that in there for sure. I think there's also something that you put your finger on a little bit in terms of how we handled that and how transparent we were with people about that problem and how it transpired. And this is not the first time that we've gone over this. We had a large webinar a couple of months after, telling everybody exactly what happened, going through all the mitigation steps that we put in place to make sure it would never happen again. But that's not the only time that we've done stuff like that. Whenever there's an issue, we as a company have addressed it head on. And that's something that makes us different. We do admit when there's a problem. We do point it out to people when there's a problem. And that's something that's not only in how we communicate, but it's in our heritage and it's in the product. The product, if you make some mistake or if some other provider makes some mistake, anytime there's an error, it's coded to very specifically reach out to you and say, hey, I think there's a problem here. And sometimes that actually causes a little bit of extra support issues when people are like, hey, I don't think there's a problem. But we've intentionally built it in such a way to be very transparent and provide all the possible debugging information to users, not just our own internal support staff, but directly to users. I think that's a big difference that we have versus a lot of other companies that we see. Worst day turned into pretty solid after we got through all of that, but it was a long, long slog.
Yeah, I have chills just really, and I mean, you did, you took 90% of that, 99% of it was on you, but I had chills just thinking, putting myself back there, and like every 5 minutes wanting to be like, Chris, how are we doing? What's going on? And of course I'm like thousands of miles away on this like once in a lifetime trip. And that was that was when you realize this thing you've built for years and years, these people have come with you, these customers now, from a couple of customers to thousands of customers, it all can be very fragile. And you realize the fragility in that moment. And it's like, oh my God, holy shit. Right? And I think what's interesting about that is the exact opposite feeling happened on the best day of the business, in a sense. And that's the holy shit on realizing that the ship was going and building and was going to last. It's kind of the opposite of like the fragility of, no, it's not. It could all fall apart. And that was in 2017, 2018, when we had the revenue runway and we had our little spreadsheets and our burn down charts. And we saw that you were full-time on the business. I could come off the I think it was still on some contracts, the Federal Reserve at that point, but we could, without taking any seed money, any venture capital, still just bootstrapped forever, just the two of us, we could take on me full-time. And then eventually, if that runway held, before the bank account got to zero, as revenue was climbing, if we bottomed out at the right spot, I would be on full-time and we'd start to set that increase toward employee number 3, the first employee that was not you and me. And in that period of time when it worked, you realize the revenue is there to last. It's building and growing, and it's not going away. It's not like in the consulting days of decades ago when we were with Ed and the old crew. Like, oh man, when this ends, this is great. But when this ends next month, you got to find that next contract. You got to find that next customer. You have to, turn that crank and keep it. It's tiring. It's depressing. You realized here, the word of mouth, the community, the product was just starting to carry forward. It was starting to grow based on a lot of hard work, but it was starting to grow kind of on its own. And it was here to stay. And incredibly empowering that moment. I remember, realizing, wow, everybody else we read and follow online, all these other guys have written the books, they're right. That's not just bullshit that worked for them. This is a real thing, the hockey stick and so forth. Yeah,
and that's a really good point. That was always something that I was interested in, looking at those guys that had made a business work, that had made a software as a service, the recurring, building up a product, that kind of looking at the responsible growth, some of the lean startups, not the really massive venture-backed, but how you could do it and actually grow and hit that hockey stick, small as it may be, for a while, and get into that and start being able to provide for yourself. And eventually we ended up providing for a lot of different families.
And it leads to a ton of these best days, because what ends up happening is people surprise you, and the product and the community surprise you in ways that you never saw coming. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about the price increase of 2021. I think it was the first time we did a large price increase. We just realized that we're undercharging. We just don't, people aren't paying enough for the product, which of course we first learned in 2017 when we actually started charging for the product and stopped giving it away so much. So that was the first lesson in pricing psychology. But in 2021, there was another moment like that where we were like, look, we need to increase prices. But we're not going to sneak around. We're not going to, pretend that it's something it's not, or try and sneak a backdoor price in or something else. And so I wrote a long blog post, like an open letter to the community. Probably way too long, but it laid out all the reasons why we needed to charge more. And we basically laid it out. We don't have seed money, we don't have venture, we don't have round A. Any of the rounds we haven't. There's some aunt that's giving us money to start this thing. Right? It's purely based on what we give you and what you give us. And so we needed more of what you were giving us. So we wanted to increase the price. And we laid out. We had our spreadsheets again and our little burnouts. And okay, this kind of customer of this size is going to face this kind of increase. And some people would have a 20 or 30% increase, but that's how it is. That's how it needed to go. And I figured there would be, pitchforks at the front of the comment line, I guess, on the blog post. The pitchforks in front of the castle. And it was the exact opposite. I mean, we got those. Yeah, we have thousands of customers. You have some people with pitchforks because they have pitchforks all the time. But it was just an outpouring of like, this is awesome. You guys deserve it. Yes, you are. Yes, you don't charge enough. Yes, we're willing to pay more. We love that you're stable. We love that you're being transparent, to your point. And you should have done this a long time ago. Yeah. Like, what took you so long?
Yeah.
And so you learn, oh man, the transparency and the work of laying all this out and everything, it paid off. And it was, what was on the other side of it is totally different than what we first thought. So yeah, that webinar, Under the Hood, with the engineers, I think it was called, which going back, and it was kind of to memorialize what had happened and what we were doing since then to correct it. All of those things pay off hugely in spades down the road. If you're willing to pull the Band-Aid off, you're willing to face it head on. So that's in there. That's in that DNA too. So this hardest day, not just hard on you, probably hard on Devin, people around you, right? Which makes me wonder, in general, people ask all the time about founders, and people in our position, about burnout, work-life balance. How's that been for you here in Arizona versus me in Virginia? How have you faced that? What are your thoughts on burnout?
Burnout and work-life balance are intertwined, and I think a lot of people think about those concepts incorrectly or not fully. Work-life balance is not something that you're attempting to be continually balanced. You'll never get everything exactly 50-50, 50% work, 50% life. it's something where you have to balance it over time, where you invest enough in work, you invest enough in family, it goes in cycles. You have cycles of life. And that also colors burnout. Burnout isn't from working too much. It's from, I guess you could say, not getting satisfaction, not seeing results of your work. I've seen it in jobs sometimes where you feel like you're not going anywhere, your work is getting thrown away, it's not getting useful, you're not being able to make decisions. You just kind of have to grind. But for me, the business that we do is very exciting, and especially when building product, creating new features, optimizing things, and doing that creation, those kinds of things, you'll never burn out. Running email, trying to do all of that stuff, yeah, maybe. You get to that point where you get enough of that and you just can't do anymore. But the creating, the thinking, that stuff, it fuels and rejuvenates. It doesn't burn you out.
I agree, 100%. That's why I can't go on vacation for more than like a pure vacation where you're doing nothing but vacation. I can't do it any more than like a day or two. I have to have some time to think and come back to work a little bit before going back to the fishing pole or whatever.
Yeah, and it's useful. It's useful to take a minute away, but stuff stacks up. And a lot of it is the mental load. It's hard to get rid of that mental load, and emptying isn't really the solution. Being able to process and manage, and that's where the balance comes in. For some time, you're doing mostly work. For other times, you're doing mostly family. But that's also the beauty of where we've gotten to with our corporate culture, and particularly the remote work situation that we have. It allows you to not waste that couple hours a day and commute and invest that back into your family and back into yourself while still getting a lot of very focused work done.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else to add to that. I agree completely. That's I used to get upset because I would give my sons chores. You know, I have 4 kids. The oldest 3, as you know,
Yeah.
the boys. You know, you give them a list. Here's your chore list for today. Go do it. And whatever thing on that list is paid for, or that's like, you know, something that they are going to be compensated for in some way, or whatever they get to drive decision making, always goes much smoother. It's the first thing on the list they want to do. And I used to get frustrated. Then I used to see, oh yeah, that's you.
Yeah.
That was your problem. That's why you didn't like, you know, working at the Fed or the Washington Post media, you know, with these other companies over the years. That was exactly you. You didn't have that autonomy. You didn't like you. I think that, to your point on burnout, I think that's what burnout really is when, you know, it's not working a lot. It's working a lot on the same thing for which you have no direction. You know, all the things that you said. So I think that's something else we completely align on. I don't know if that was original to you and original to me, or we just over the years fell into that same. Is that something founders just fall into, or is that a personality thing?
I think you really have to like the work to do what we do. If you didn't like it, there's no way you would put in enough time. Because that's really what it was. If you think back to the very beginning, we spent almost a decade with not really getting a whole lot out of it other than the enjoyment of building the software and those little seeds of seeing the enjoyment of our users saying, oh, this is pretty freaking cool. Nobody knows about it, but I do. And I've got the little secret app that makes everything way better in my life.
Work-life balance and thinking about the work burnout, but thinking about the family, the life burnout too. Right? I mean, you can be burned out on either side, especially 4 kids, 3 kids.
3 kids.
Are you done at 3? Or one more coming?
You never know.
Yeah. So...
looking over at my wife over here.
Yeah, pretend
giving
she's
me the
not.
evil eye.
So, you know, there's burnout that happens there too. I mean, we've talked about how, you know, sometimes it's a relief to get back into the office and get to that burnout versus, you know, kids knocking on the door and you need a ride somewhere, or, you know, going to their, you know, coaching their games. So I think there's got to be a mix in that the integration of those two things you talked about has to be there on that side too. This is something Katie and I talk about a lot, where, you know, and there's synergies from that, because if it's all work or all family, and I'm always kind of wondering, what is the life in work-life balance anyway? You're talking about family, you're talking about vacation, There's
Right.
3 or 4 different areas.
Somebody
It's not
else's life, your life. What are
right,
you doing?
it's not like I'm in the office or I'm fishing. Right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other stuff going on. So, and for me, it's kids. I mean, it's just night and day kid stuff. So, that has to be mixed really well as well. Not just for the balance and the things you were talking about, but because she's burnout too on that stuff. So the mix is good on that side as well. Up and down on work versus increasing, decreasing, kid stuff, her stepping in, stepping out. So that's where I'm at. How about you? Yours are a few years younger than mine, but similar probably.
you have the seasons of life. You have times where you work a little harder, you got to prepare for something, and then times where you go on vacation, you got to mix those things in. One thing that's become important to me is focusing on the family, not all the time, but making sure that you're actually focused on them when you're there. It's very easy to be physically adjacent, and it's better than not being adjacent, right? Like if it's better than being on the road all the time and not being around. But if all the time that you're spending with your family, you're on your phone either doing emails or scrolling the internets because you just need to zone out after investing a bunch of mental effort, that can end up being you're in the same place, but you're not really spending family time.
Yeah, great point.
So you really have to, and some of that's fine. Some of that you want to sit there, cut over, watch movies. Maybe you're doing that together with your family. I just started on the Fast and Furious marathon with my kids, which they're really enjoying. We're about 8 movies in, 8 out of 10. So
they made 10?
Yeah. I think the 11th will be the last one. It kind of tapered off a little bit after Paul Walker passed, but they brought in The Rock and Jason Statham and just kind of amped it up. But yeah, so you have to choose activities and do things with your kids that you can focus on and they're really interested in. Recently, I've been doing a little bit of vibe coding with Charlie, my oldest, just setting up some of those coding environments like Cursor or Claude and saying, hey, what kind of a thing, you provide the creativity basically, and I'll show you how to talk to it and get out, whatever little game that you want to do. One of the ones was Crossy Road, but underwater. So we had all these little fish going up and eating little fish foods, and sort of worked. It was also, you get to that realization, and it's cool because people get to see what coding is without actually having to learn all the languages. You start to understand how specific that you have to be. It's a whole rabbit trail, but basically to take it back, you have to spend that focus time with your family just like you spend that focus time with work. And a lot of the times when you want to just zone, it'll be better to go do something active. Like I like mountain biking. That's something where my brain can zone, but I'm doing something active and getting my blood pumping instead of just sitting on the couch.
Is that good though, to have your brain turned off when you're mountain biking? Have you had any?
So no, that's how it works though. You're 100% focused, right? You're not thinking about anything other than,
it's not turned off.
Yes, it's not. Well, you're not thinking. You're subconsciously seeing the flow and getting through it, and seeing where you want to place the bike, where you want to move to not tumble.
So I've mentioned fishing a couple of times. I don't actually fish very much. I would like to. I guess that's what's coming through: a cold beer and a fishing rod. Did that a few times this summer with my boys. There's something about being in that moment, that I look forward to. Again, I don't do it very much, but so relaxation for me has been very hard to come by, and I've talked to Katie about this, neighbors, other people. It comes up in conversation, but I kind of brush it off. I have a high idle state is what I say. I'm always kind of going. I'm always, grabbing, I'm going to install a new camera at the house or do some new project or whatever. Clean out the pool filter, something. But that's not really, I guess that's relaxation. It's not relaxation, I think, in the typical sense. There's been a couple of moments in the last couple of years where the family's been gone for some reason. So the kids are gone, everyone's gone. and I have time to just sit and think about different things than work. And so I'm kind of in this, maybe I'm going to start mountain biking. I'm not sure where to do that in Virginia. But
There's a lot of good trails.
Are there?
Yeah.
That's right. You're from Virginia originally, so you would know. But I need to find something like that coming up, because I don't feel like I actually have. I mean, I feel like I relax a lot of things in which I'm still very busy. I don't know if I'm relaxing or not.
Yeah, it's something you build up over time. All of those things that I've gotten into, the mountain biking, the car racing, it's the first time is definitely not relaxing. You're really mentally there thinking about it, but then it becomes something that's more natural as you get into it. And you do stuff like you do a lot of walking. That's another good one where you get in, you're doing the movement, and you're just able to zone.
I feel like the older I get, the more old man tendencies I have around relaxation. You're right, the walking, I like to walk. Yeah, those quiet moments, looking at nature, things like that. I don't want to say it out loud because then everyone else will know.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, as I get older, there's some, you can see how it's possible to get set in your ways if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've chosen to invest time and energy in intentionally breaking out of. And that's also why it's a constant battle with a routine versus doing interesting things. Routines are great. I love my routine. I get up super early, probably 3 or 4 usually, because I can get a bunch of productive stuff done. But you can also get into the routine too much where you only do the same thing over and over again. You never get out. You never switch things up. And you always have to be bringing in new things. But that means something's got to die.
Right.
You can't just keep bringing new things in. You have to try a hobby for a season. That's why mountain biking and car racing work so well for me here in Arizona, because you can't really race in the summer. It's just way too hot for the car. And similarly, when it's deepest, darkest winter, it's not super fun to be out there at 7 a.m. when it's 40 degrees and you're mountain biking. So I'm able to cycle those. Stuff like that, where you can start doing one thing, switch to something else, maybe do something completely different. That's when it's exciting and you start to have that rejuvenation, but you have to keep putting the energy into it, which is a constant challenge.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be it for today. We covered everything from our worst day to our best day and our various routines to avoid burnout. So hope you guys got some good information and thoughts out of that. If you have a routine that works for you, drop it in the comments below, like, and subscribe.